Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 5th episode of Chapters, Real People, Real Stories. Let us first start off by doing a little bit of a brief recap of the past several shows that I had. It all kind of started with a little bit of an introduction on my part. Then I had my first guest on in Shaylin Pierce, which she talked about the unfortunate passing of her husband, Nick. And that was a powerful episode. I'd highly recommend going back and listening to it. I ended up spending time down in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which might be a destination Kourtney, my guest today, might be a little bit familiar with if she's ever been there. But I ended up deciding to do a spontaneous episode recapping that trip, sharing photos, sharing videos that we had during that. And then lastly, we had a ghost story episode that we did. It's called the Paranormal Collection. So I had Ethan Lamar on where he told some ghost stories from his family's side from their house. So that's worth checking out. But Kourtney, she's my guest today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. Her name's Kourtney Hentgen overall. But Kourtney, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Well, I had to ask. I'd always ask Shaylin to say, like, hello. No, but I'll
was
tell
like,
you. Well, I have to ask you for starters, like, have you ever done podcasting at all, or have you ever done anything like this? Is this your first experience?
this is my first experience ever.
All right, popping your podcast cherry. But no, I mean, more than anything, Kourtney, like we talked before the show started and everything, and I really appreciate you just being open to doing this. Again, for all the audience to know, me and her's history is we've been friends for years now. I think one of the biggest connections we had, we always used to talk to each other a lot about football, especially during football season. We have a tie to each other during the Seahawks Patriots Super Bowl years ago. I'll never forget that phone conversation me and you had back then. It was painful for me and glorious for Kourtney. But anyways, our friendship goes a while back. But during this past year, she went through a very tough time. Obviously, she's going to go into her family as well. But she did have a baby boy that was on the way, and unfortunately had passed away at birth. So Kourtney's going to be touching on that story tonight. But this episode is more about not just that, but we're also going to cover Kourtney's background a little bit. And we're going to do a little bit of a fun segment with Kourtney. So Kourtney, let's go ahead and get kind of things started with chapter 1, which is who is Kourtney Hentgen? And I'd like to start off with just a general, like, can you tell the audience a little bit where you were born and raised?
Well, first off, I want to say good for you for being able to say my last name because nobody can ever say it correctly. But I was born in Tell City, Indiana in June of 1990. My parents are Craig and Helen Cast. I have a sister, Kaylee Chain, and I also have a niece, and her name is Braylon Freilich, and a nephew, it's Dylan Chain. My brother-in-law is Greg Chain, and they are in Cloverport. I went to Tell City High School. I was, I guess, the typical Southern Indiana girl.
Well,
Yeah,
hey,
sure.
well, hey, it's a good story, Brett. And I actually know I'm not sure if I know your father, but I know I've met your mom at least a number of times, and she's an extremely nice lady and everything. Of course, we're going to touch on them more as well, but for starters, again, thanks for mentioning your a little bit of your background. Obviously, I know you went to Tell City. We talked a little bit about that before the show, which is also the same name of the community that she grew up in here as well. So, like, I have to start off by asking you too, because when I talked to Shaylin, she was from Derby. She went into kind of describing a little bit about what Derby was like to people that never been there, or doesn't really know it, a little river town. But like Tell City, very much the same river town, historic background there. But Kourtney, if you had a friend up north or whatever come up to you and say, what is Tell City? How would you describe it? Would you tell them that it's not all just Tell City pretzel?
Well, actually, a lot of people up here know Tell City Chair Company.
Yeah.
Shockingly. Or I always have to say, do you know where Holiday World is? Of course, they instantly know where that is, or Evansville. But most of the time, I just tell people it's a small town. Literally, you can see the banks of Kentucky. The house that I grew up in was right next to the old hospital, and we would go back into the woods, and you could see the Ohio River, and you could look over into the banks and all the farm fields in Kentucky. And I try to explain that to people, and they're like, "Oh, so you're close enough that if you did marry your cousin, it's acceptable." I'm like, "No."
Well,
Like, that is so wrong.
well, it's a good description of Tell City overall. And I think it's kind of interesting that you mentioned Tell City Chair. That they remember. Like I've been in the same boat myself, though. Usually, that's kind of my go-to thing if they have trouble is, do you know where a Holiday World is? And everybody around here, at least they seem to know where a Holiday World is. So we're like, yeah, we're about 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so from Holiday World, roughly this direction. A lot of times, if it's out of state, I'm like, where Louisville is, where Evansville is, we're an hour east or west of there, or roughly is what I would usually tell different people. But yeah, so I'm from Cannleton, Indiana. I've told that on the intro show, which is the town that's right next to Tell City, Indiana. So of course, Kourtney and I from different rival schools, much like how I guess with Shaylin was. She was from Perry Central. She went to Perry Central High School. Now for your background, or let's actually talk a little bit more about your family. Like, tell me a little bit more about like your mom and dad. Like, I know you know what you do for a living now. Like, if you had to describe your parents to people, like what's different traits about your mother and father that you really cherish a lot if you had to talk about them?
Well, the first thing is my parents met in prison. They were both guards. Every time I say
I'll
that,
be
people
honest,
are
I
like,
got really awkward
"What?"
there.
Right? I know. Yeah, they were both guards at Branchville. They have been married for 36 years, and they're still like that gross, I want to hold your hand, kiss you in public type love. They still embarrass us even after all this time, but that's the kind of marriage that everybody wants. So we definitely have a good example of what we look for in the future, and we have great examples to follow in our marriages as far as my sister and I. And they're both very caring. My mom is laid back, and my dad's a super amazing cook, so I kind of got his cooking skills and his kind of outlook on the world of, am I allowed to cuss? I don't give a shit attitude.
Hey,
And
it's all
then
right. It's welcome.
sorry. And my mom, she, I got her a emotional side of anything makes me cry. I'm a huge TV fanatic, so anything Grey's Anatomy, I cry at the drop of a dime, and I definitely got that from my mother.
Well, I have to say, it actually kind of surprised me a little bit because I didn't expect you to be such a sappy one, one that gets a little bit teary eyed during those TV shows and all that. But yeah, actually, I'm expecting multiple surprises probably. But yeah, I mean, just that's awesome that you have that and that you share those traits from your parents. I love the examples that you gave of your parents, the traits that really stood out to them. And again, being around your mom a little bit, I can sense that. I feel like you got like part of her sense of humor. I'm sure your dad, probably has a good sense of humor as well. So maybe you inherited it from both. But let's talk a little about your sister too. What's the age difference between you and her?
She is 33, so we're 2 years and 9 months apart. She graduated in 2006 from Tell City. She's been married to her husband for 11 years, and my niece, she just turned 16. So they live over in Kentucky. She's a nurse over at the clinic in Cloverport. So she stays pretty busy, but I don't get to see my family as often as I would like to anymore because of me living so far away.
Yeah, I mean, how far is Wabash from? I'm guessing that's where you live now, but how far of
Yeah,
a drive is
yeah.
that from the city?
4.5, 5 hours.
Ooh, yeah, you're way
We're
up
up
there.
by Fort. Yeah, we're up by Fort Wayne.
Oh. Well, since I mentioned Wabash, like again, I've never been there before. Like, how would you describe Wabash?
Honestly, it kind of reminds me of Tell City. It's a little bit bigger. The downtown aspect, I would say, is about the same. It's got like all the boutiques and the shops and There's a coffee shop downtown, but we also have a place called the Honeywell Center, and concerts and comedians come. Like Willie Nelson's been here, Leanne Rhymes has been here. We saw one of the guys from the Blue Collar Comedy Tour.
Jeff Foxworth?
No, the one that drinks all the time. What is it? Ron White. Is it Ron White?
Ron White.
Yeah. We saw Ron White. We got to meet Rodney Carrington. He did a show here like 2 years ago. So some pretty big names, and that draws a pretty big crowd here. So that's what they're known for, is the Honeywell Center.
Awesome. Well, I have to say, just to kind of revert back towards Tell City and that time that you were in high school there, because again, you guys were a much bigger high school than what Cannleton was. I think our entire school system was like 78 kids from K through 12 my senior year. I had like 20 people in my class when I graduated, which is probably a lot different than what it was for you. One of them being my twin brother, as you know. But like looking back on your high school days, I'm just kind of curious, because I thought you were involved in different kind of extracurricular activities, but like what did you participate in back in high school? Like, did you play anything or cheerleading or anything like that?
Volleyball was my favorite. I was on student council my freshman year. I played softball. Started basketball, but basketball was not my thing. Never was. I think I only did it because other people did. So.
Well, I mean, back then, like with like volleyball and softball, I asked Shaylin this question too, because I always think it's fun. But when you look back on that now, because years later, like you had told me you're 30, so like, do you recall back then, whenever you guys had played like your last high school, your last game you ever were going to play in volleyball or softball, like, do you remember that being an emotional thing for you, or were you more one of those people who are like, oh, thank God it's over?
I don't think I was ever really emotional. I think it was just more of this is like the next chapter of my life, I guess. I don't know. I always thought that I would never leave Tell City. I always thought I'd be somebody that would like go to college and come back. But now that I've been away from it, I can't ever see myself going back. Nothing against Tell City. It's just I love where I live, and it reminds me of home, and now this is home. But Tell City will always be where my family is. So I guess I just never really thought about it. I'm not really super sentimental. Unless it comes to sports.
Well, I have to say, I have to say, it was interesting how you said that, at least with looking back at Wabash, because how that's really like with your family there now, which we're going to talk about next, is it feels like you've really kind of adapted to just living away from Tell City, because like you stressed, it's no offense to Tell City or nothing, or your hometown, but that's kind of what we all do, right? I mean, there's a lot of us that will at least go away for a little while, and some of us might come back, some of us might not. That's just kind of how life is. But like for you, since I think it's a good segue into it, is your family now. Can you talk to me a little bit about your husband? Like, how did you guys meet, and recall a little bit about whenever you guys got married?
Well, obviously our story is very romantic. No, I decided after being at Indiana State for a year that I wanted to go to mortuary school. So I applied to Mid-America College and got accepted. And when we finally got our assigned seats, there was a guy that sat in front of me. And I thought, oh, he's cute. And I didn't really think anything of it. I wasn't planning on going to mortuary school to find a husband. Obviously, that's what happened. But, so, we had talked a little bit. We had worked on homework together. And the first year was a little up and down. At first, I was kind of like, maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I do. And then we had a friend that had chimed in, and she was right in his ear and telling him what to say, and then he'd text it to me. It was actually the girl that I lived with. Her name was Brittany. And so then finally I'm like, all right, we're going to do this. And then all of a sudden it was like a light switch and something changed. And ever since then we've been inseparable. And then right after he graduated, I kept getting sick, and I thought, what's wrong with me? And then we found out that we were pregnant with Adelie.
Well, I also want to ask you too. It's a great story back then. I love that because I remember you going into mortuary school, and I was thinking, man, shit, you got to have like a, not that you had to have a morbid sense of mind or anything like that, but I was like, to deal with like dead bodies. That sounds kind of something that I wouldn't be able to do myself. But anyways, just talking to you about you, like looking at you with your husband, uh, like looking back on your wedding. From what I remember, didn't you guys have like a beach themed wedding? Like you guys went down somewhere along the beach somewhere. What was that like?
Yes, we got married in Destin, Florida, which I'm so glad we did. I don't want to say it's like we eloped, but it's kind of like we did. But I didn't have to worry about having like a reception or paying for everybody else to party and like that kind of stuff. It was nice. Just we got to be in Florida for 2 weeks. It was just kind of a nice little getaway for a small group of our family and our friends, and it was extremely hot. That's the only thing that I didn't like about that day, but it
I
was
say, judging by the pictures back then, I remember it looked like it was just a wonderful day that you guys all had. So we ended up having that kind of typical wedding on our end, the church wedding, and then the big reception at the Shergan Center in Tell City. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was awesome, but I know for me, it flew by so fast, and a lot of people would tell you that
yeah.
like it's just going to fly by. I remember spending, I think, more time just going around shaking hands and holding babies, almost like a politician. And then the next thing I know, it was over. It was all wrapped up, and we are going on the honeymoon. Now, where did you guys go for your honeymoon?
We ended up going to Key West. We flew down the next week because we had debated on driving since we were already in Florida, but it was going to take us like 10 hours just not to leave the state. So we were like, okay, we're just going to fly. So we flew down to Key West and we were down there for 8 or 9 days. And it was almost more like a spring break trip than a honeymoon, I think.
Oh, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Thought I might actually cut it off. Okay, but anyways, no, that's awesome. Like I said, which was ironic, as I mentioned earlier on in the show about going to Gatlinburg. That was where Ashley and I went for our honeymoon 6 years ago. So as of October 25th, so we spent our good time down there. That's always a special moment. But again, we talked a little bit about your husband now, but like your children, can you tell me a little bit more about your children? Now, you talked a little bit about when you first found out you're pregnant with your first child, but can you tell us a little bit about them, like their names, their ages, and a little bit about their personalities?
Our oldest, her name is Adelie Nicole. She just turned 8 in July. She's in second grade. She is taking a dual immersion class. So half of her day is in Spanish and the other half is in English. So the stuff that she learns, it just amazes me because she can say the Pledge of Allegiance in Spanish. And I'm like, I don't even think I learned that in my college, or not my college, in my high school class. She's super smart. She definitely gets that from her father. And our second child is Hayes Nicholas. He's 2. He's very rambunctious. Gets into everything. I'll say I could talk about the things that he does in this house. I'll be like, today he took a squirt applesauce and stuck it in our air vent. He squirted it all down into. So now I'm waiting until our room smells like apple, cinnamon. So he's just wild.
So
I mean, he's a
he's
typical
trying to help.
2-year-old, I guess. I
Yeah, I'll
guess.
say he's trying to help you guys out. You guys don't need an air freshener then if you got that going on.
No,
That's going to circulate through the house.
it smell like apple pie in our house.
Well, thanks for that background on that. And it sounds to me like it's cool in a way because I like the fact that you have a daughter and a son, or because it's like you have one of the best of both worlds. Again, I've talked about before. I don't have children myself. I don't plan to. I actually have 5. We call them fur babies, but we have 5 cats Kourtney's got some kittens on her end as well. But anyways, it's awesome. There, I actually want to talk a little bit about your fandom too before we go into chapter 2, which again I mentioned pre-show, and I've known over the years that Kourtney here. I have several friends that are New England Patriots fans, but Kourtney is by far the most diehard New England Patriot fan that I know. But I have to ask you about that, Kourtney. How in the hell did you become a New England Patriots fan to begin with?
And I mean, of course, like Drew Bledsoe, great guy to watch play. I feel like it's just like a long line of, this was New England, and then the Super Bowls start coming, and then it's like, how can you not be like right behind a team? And then you just every Sunday, that's what I was doing, is watching New England football. And it's it's kind of hard to just pick one thing, because it's been 20 years in the making. So
well, that's a good way to sum it up, really, because it wasn't like one particular moment, like it flipped like a light switch, like I love New England. It was like all these moments you got to witness over time. I think my favorite New England moment, if I had to say so as just a general fan, would be back, was it 2001, the year of 9/11, whenever didn't the Patriots play the Rams in the Super Bowl that year and New England won? It was kind of fitting because they had the Patriot theme, red, white, and blue. It just like a storybook ending for the NFL and for the nation back then. But I remember that being kind of a powerful moment. And you've also got to witness the great Tom Brady through his entire career now as well. I don't know how you feel about him now, but I mean, I'm sure that you're a huge fan with him back whenever he was with New England. But again, anyways, Kourtney,
that's a bitter subject.
You don't want to touch on that? You want to talk about Tom Brady a little bit? But anyways, Kourtney, what I'm going to say is that we're going to go into.
Oh.
Can you still?
Daughter, sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Yes.
I was like, I heard another baby talking again. Is it not?
No, it was Adelaide. She was coming in here for, I think, my charger.
Well, what I'm going to do is we're going to what we now say is chapter 2, how we can trigger Kourtney. So this is actually a new segment that we're going to do, which is kind of a trial segment, really. But I explained to Kourtney that I'm basically going to do like 5 different words or a phrase, and it's basically just to trigger and see what kind of emotion does that get from Kourtney. What kind of what if it like spawns a story? So that's kind of one of the things I want to see what happens here. So more than anything, we're going to kind of start, Kourtney. Like I said, I'm going to give you a word, and then you just go and let me know what that first thing that pops in your head. So for starters, item number 1 is MySpace. What comes to mind when you hear the word MySpace?
You used to have your top 8 friends, and I remember that if you were mad at somebody, you would take them out of your top 8. And then I remember thinking, oh my God, we get to have our top 12, so I can add some of my other friends. And then the background music, you could find like your favorite song and play it when someone came to your profile. Yeah. I actually just signed into mine probably like a year ago. It doesn't look anything like it used to.
I want to say I haven't touched mine in years. I figure it's much like a ghost town now, but I do remember the top 5 or top 12 friends that you'd have on there. That make for some good arguments. It was such a weird thing looking back on it now to have that when you really think about it. But I do remember the background music too. I remember the background music on your profiles. So I thought that was that's one of the things I was kind of wondering, because Kourtney graduated in 2009. I was thinking, man, I wonder if she remembers the MySpace era or not, or if that was that long ago. I don't remember what year it was now. But yeah, I thought that was kind of a funny one to throw in there. But anyways, item number 2, Kourtney. So this is item number 2. What comes to mind when you hear the word Ghostbusters?
I wasn't really a Ghostbusters fan, so really nothing.
You're like, I got nothing to say.
I mean, I wasn't really a Ghostbusters fan, so I don't know. Well, here, the song, I guess.
Well, here, I'll give you another one, and this is probably I think it would spawn a good story idea. But this is item number 3. graduation ceremony. Whenever you hear graduation ceremony, what comes to mind from back in your graduation ceremony?
Sitting next to my cousin Andy Cast. He was our valedictorian, and I remember him telling me, "Oh, I can't believe I have to get up there and talk. I can't believe I have to get up there and talk." I'm like, "You'll be fine." I mean, he saved me through so many classes because you had to like pair up with the person that sat next to you alphabetically. So of course I got lucky because, one, we were family, and two, he was the smartest kid in our class. But I just remember thinking, "Oh, you'll be fine. I don't even know why you're worried." And looking back on it now, since we lost him 7 years ago, it's like a bittersweet moment because I just remember we were sitting there laughing and not really paying attention to what everybody else was saying and doing. So it's kind of a bittersweet moment to
Yeah,
think about.
actually, yeah, that really actually spawned a really good story there. So I'm actually, I love hearing that because I remember him, and obviously that's a whole nother story in of itself as well with his passing years ago. But yeah, it's powerful stuff because when I think of my graduation ceremony, just to just to give you a little bit of a breather too. But what stands out to me, I just remember it being kind of surreal. But we did this slideshow thing where we'd show pictures of us like as children for each one of the classmates. And I remember for me and Robbie's photos, it would be like a collage of different pictures. But I still remember one of them was whenever we were kids. I don't know why it was like this, but we were butt ass naked in the living room and we were dunking the basketball in one of those little kid guns. So it was just like a picture of us from behind where you can see nothing but our bare ass on the picture. But I remember them putting those up on the screens during the graduation ceremony and everybody laughing at it. I know there's some friends of mine that were still there that were listening and they'll remember that, but I still remember that being one of the things that stuck out to me was back then. So but anyways, to continue on here, Kourtney, item number 4 is the word Halloween. What do you think of whenever you hear the word Halloween?
My least favorite holiday.
Oh wow, really? I figured you'd be a Halloween lover yourself.
I mean, I love horror movies and that kind of stuff, but I have never been big on like the whole dressing up thing. I think the one reason why I love Halloween now is because I can go trick or treating. I don't have to dress up. I don't have to do any of the work, and I can eat my kids' candy. That's awful. I know.
See, there's some benefits to it. No, since we're on that topic, real quick, since that's your least favorite, what is your favorite holiday?
I mean, this might be cliche, but Christmas.
Yeah, that's how mine is too.
Well, and I like St. Patrick's Day too.
Yeah, St. Patrick's Day is great. It's a good reason to drink on St. Patrick's Day.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Well, okay, I have item number 5, and this is the last one before we go into chapter 3. But again, I guess we kind of already touched on this a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I was going to say Tom Brady Tampa Bay Buccaneer jersey is what my item was going to be. And then I was going to ask you if you owned that jersey. I could tell you, if you're not watching the YouTube video, Kourtney just rolled her eyes at that thought. So she's like, I do not want to talk anymore about it. I'm over it. But yeah, but Kourtney, anyways.
Oh, I could talk about that all day.
But like I said, huge Patriots fan yourself. But just looking back on these first 2 chapters, anyways, Kourtney, I love getting to hear a little bit more about your family's history, and of course, having a little bit of fun with the triggered segment. That's something I'm going to try on there. If anybody wants to give feedback on there or some different ideas, I'd love to hear it. Just something a little fun, a little try in there. But now we're going on to chapter 3, which is the main core of this episode, and I feel the most important element to the episode, which is the story of Kye Hentgen, which is Kourtney's son. And but anyways, Kourtney, let's kind of start this off. I gave you the show plan on this. This is really an open-ended discussion, but I thought the best way to start is let's kind of start from the beginning with it. I mean, obviously you've had 2 kids now, but like whenever you became pregnant with Kye, and again, this is before you found out the gender of the baby, but like, what was that feeling like for you guys when you found out you were going to be pregnant with your 3rd child?
When I found out, it was just a spontaneous. My mom was here visiting, and I'm like, you know what? I'm late. I think I need to take a test. And I did. And it said pregnant. And I'm like, oh, okay. So here we go again. And my husband was not home. He was actually out on a death call. And I called to him and I said, guess what? like, what? I'm like, we're gonna have another baby. He's like, are you serious? I'm like, this is our third time doing this. I don't think I would joke about this. Yes. And so then we both started laughing. He's like, well, congratulations. And I'm like, well, congratulations to you too. You had part in this too. But of course, I mean, we were both excited because, we've always talked about 3 kids, and then, the more it goes on, that number keeps going up. So, but yeah, so we're super excited. The Obviously Hayes didn't understand, so he was not even 1.5 yet, and of course Adley was, I'm having another brother or sister. So she's never been super thrilled about her siblings, but one day she'll thank us for that.
You know what stands out to me from that first part there is just the way that you and your husband had that conversation on the phone about when you first found out you're pregnant. It's almost like 2 seasoned veterans talking to each other. I was like, well, congratulations. You're like, well, congratulations to you too. I love
Well,
that.
I feel like once you get to the 3rd kid, it's just like, hey, we've done this before, we can do it again. So
Yeah, that's awesome though. I love that part. Now, let's kind of fast forward just a little bit, but I don't know how far. Again, I'm not an expert on pregnancy, so I don't know what that time frame is to where you can find out the sex of the baby. But like, whenever you guys found out that it was going to be a boy, like, what was that feeling like for you guys when you found out you were going to have another son?
well, we actually found out at like 11 weeks. Normally it's around 20 because I do the anatomy scan, but we did the genetic testing, which checks for uh, chromosome, like making sure everything's okay, like Down syndrome, like that kind of stuff. And they can locate I want to say the Y chromosome, I think. Don't take my word on that. I think that's what's in the male. But so if they detect the Y chromosome in the blood work, that's how they know that the fetus is male. And if they don't, it's female. So we actually found out it was probably like, I want to say 12 weeks. So we found out like right before Christmas last year.
Yeah, interesting.
So
So it's a little bit not like throwing knowledge my way. I'm learning a little bit more about pregnancy from you and everything. But obviously, thanks for sharing that already on there. I can only imagine what that feeling's like. Like I said, not being a parent myself, I can't imagine that excitement the first time around. But like I said, I still recall like how you described the conversation with you and your husband. But again, not to fast forward too much through the pregnancy, because I'm like I said, this is your guys' third round going through
right.
this, and so I'm sure by this point you guys kind of know what you need to do to prepare, at least on the initial pregnancy, like all the things to prepare. I'm sure you guys were getting a room ready and all this other stuff. That's what I'm kind of curious about for you. Could you talk to us a little bit about what
Well,
that preparation was like leading up to Kye's birth?
okay. So actually, the thing with Kye was, so Hayes was still sleeping with us. Okay, well, let's rephrase that. Hayes still sleeps with us. And all the parents that listen to this, they can judge me all they want, but now the kid's gonna sleep with me till I'm 30, or till he's 30. Anyways, that's a different subject. But I was still breastfeeding him throughout my pregnancy. So Hayes' room is set up, but he's never slept in there. Not one time. And so we thought, okay, before Kye gets here, I'm gonna wean Hayes off and then move Hayes up into his room finally. And by the time that Kye is actually in a crib, or that we feel comfortable to move them, because we've kept the kids, ideally, our plan was to keep them in here for the first year. And that's what we did with Adelie. We didn't have a problem transferring her. Hayes is a whole nother story. So we never bought a crib. And the boys were just going to share the room because the room it used to be the master bedroom in the house, like before we lived here. And you could fit 2 queen size beds in there and still have a bunch of room. So the boys would have had plenty of room to play, like as they got older. So we would just move Kye into that crib, and then Hayes could just move over to the big bed. So we never had to set anything up. So it was kind of like, we were already prepared, and we didn't have to have a baby shower because Kye and Hayes were going to be born around the same time of year, like within 3 weeks of each other. I was due June 26th with him, and Hayes' birthday is July 21st. So clothes wise, we were good. And, I had been stocking up on diapers throughout the whole pregnancy. And I think the only thing I ever bought for Kye is the outfit that he was buried in and a DockATot. That was one thing that I wanted as far as baby stuff, because we already had everything else. So we didn't have that. So I have to say one thing that I think helped me Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
But one thing emotionally that I think that like helps me is I didn't have to come home to an empty room. And I know that's not something, that you think about, but going back into it, that would have really crushed me. Like, I don't know that I would have been able to come home to that.
Yeah. Well, I can only, again, I'm trying to fathom, which we're going to talk about that day too, but like you're actually right. I would think, at least in that moment, trying to imagine it, that probably helped a little bit, or already having like that room already prepared for him. And in a way, maybe in a positive sense, looking again before what happened, but I'm sure that made things a little bit less stressful, knowing that you kind of already had this room set up, and there could be a pretty smooth transition there from the hospital and everything. But again, fast forward in a little bit, again, this is the day that I'm sure this isn't going to be an easy part to talk to. It's not even easy for me to ask you this, Kourtney, honestly, because we've been friends for a long time, and I hate this for you guys. But that come the day of Kye's birth and everything, can you walk us through that day and through that moment?
Yes. Well, actually, if you don't care, I'm going to start on, it was June 5th. I had an OBGYN appointment, and I was 37 weeks on that day. I had gone in, no signs of anything. I was 70% thinned out, and I was only like a centimeter dilated. So, really just, typical where you should be around that time in pregnancy, but I was considered full term. So if he were to be born the next day, it would have been fine. So then Saturday, we took the kids swimming at a family friend's house, and I felt a little off, but nothing to like be concerned of. It was like uncomfortable because, it was June, it was hot. I don't like hot weather, and being pregnant makes it even worse. And so I just kind of sat on the side of the pool, and the kids and Nick swam. And so then Sunday morning, I had woke up at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was having bad back pain. I just thought I was in labor because I had strictly back pain with Hayes. It was literally the exact same pain, and it started around the same time as far as, what I had experienced previously. And so I just really didn't think anything of it. Nick was going to work, and he had a funeral. So I decided to get in the tub. Hayes was still asleep. Adderley was still asleep. And I laid there. The warm water helped my back. And I didn't really think a whole lot about it. And at the time, looking back on it now, I now noticed that he was not moving. But I was just so focused on laboring at home as long as I could, because our hospital was 45 minutes away. I didn't want to go to the hospital and then turn me away and then have to come home again. So, it was my third time. I had labored at home until I was 8 centimeters with Hayes. So I thought, I've done this before, I can do it again. So I waited as long as I could, and then finally I called Nick. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. We've got to go. So, he gets home. We drop the kids off at my mother-in-law's, and I am like in excruciating pain sitting in the car. And I thought, oh my God, this is horrible. Of course, my husband says, well, be careful, I stop and get coffee. I'm like, no. Do you want to make it to the hospital with me? And so, I was not thinking anything at the time. Then we get in there and, they check in and we get up to the room and, my doctor, I'm telling her, I tried to labor at home as long as I could. And she said, oh, you're such a good girl. And, I wish everybody did that. And, so then we get back there and had changed and I could not sit up. I was in so much pain. Like I felt like I was gonna have to like push him out like right then. And I I just remember saying like we need to do this now because I am like miserable. So they put the monitor on me and they're doing the ultrasound. I could hear like a faint heartbeat. And I thought, okay, everything's fine. But you can kind of see the look on the nurse's face, which they can't say anything to you, or she wouldn't tell me. And she said, well, I think that's your heartbeat. She said, hang on, and she's moving around. And so she waits and then she goes and gets Dr. Fouts. And Dr. Fouts is looking and they still can't find a heartbeat. You could still hear my heartbeat like faintly in the background. So I don't know if I was just like in like a daze and it just didn't really hit me. And so she said, okay, we've got to do an emergency C-section right now. Oh, sorry, my daughter's in here.
Hi. Hey,
sorry. But anyways, so they said, well,
But
okay.
anyways, we're back on the recording again. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty there, but Kourtney, you were just actually got to see your daughter and wave at her, so that was kind of cool. But you're actually just talking to us about I think the nurse or the doctor coming in and explaining to you they were going to have to do an emergency C-section. But like, if you can pick off from there, be my guest. Go ahead.
So they told me that they were going to do emergency C-section, and since I was not going to be awake, they didn't have time to give me like an epidural or anything because they knew they had to get him out because they couldn't find his heartbeat. And so my husband had already put on the gown and the thing on his head, and then they told him, you can't be in there because she's not going to be awake. So he had 30 minutes of waiting outside the operating room, like waiting to find out what was going on. Neither one of us knew what was about to happen. So they were doing the blood work or trying to get the IV into me, and I was about to come off the table because I was in so much pain. And finally, they get me into surgery, and I wake up, and a lot of it's fuzzy, but I can still remember her coming to me and saying, I'm sorry, we did everything we could, but there was no heartbeat. There was nothing we could do to save him. And that's when we found out that she said when she got in there that the placenta had almost completely detached. So this had caused him to not be able to get nutrients and oxygen to him. So as time had gone on, of course, as a mom, I needed the answers. And I still to this day don't have them, but what we do know is that he passed away not long before we got to the hospital. And I think that's the hardest part about all of it, because sometimes I feel like it was something that I had done. Like if I had gone sooner, would it have saved him? Or, you know, and was there something different that I could have done? And she said that, even if we had come sooner, that we don't know what would have happened. We don't know what challenges through life he would have had. Um, the percentage of kids that are born after a placenta abruption or have lack of oxygen, they can have issues later in life, and you just don't know what has been affected as far as mentally. And I would, as much as I would love to have him here, I would also not want him to suffer as far as being in this world and not being able to live it 100%. And that would not have changed us loving him by any means. But I just think, looking back on it now, I know he's playing, he's happy, when he finally got to open his eyes, the first thing he saw was Jesus. And how many people get to say that?
Yeah. I'm sure it doesn't make things I'm sure it's comforting, but it's still in that initial moment. I can't imagine, like, for starters, again, sorry doesn't do it justice. Like, I want to sit here and tell you how much it's sorry. It's very much like I want to say before. It's almost like you want to hug the pain away from those you care about, like you guys that you've been through this. And but like like it seems that you went through your stage of you where you felt guilt. I'm sure there was a heavy amount of shock there, and I'm sure this is still fresh in your guys' mind, and it's something you never I don't think a person can ever fully recover from it. And not saying that in a bad way. Like, I think that's something you guys will always hold on to your life. He will always be a part of your life, even if he isn't here. But that doesn't mean that void won't be filled with something else that can like, almost like, I don't want to say like a band-aid, but it's almost like something will fill that void versus suffering or negativity. But like you said, you also, when you think logically about it, you would want your son to have a very strong quality of life too. You wouldn't want him to be handicapped to a certain extent. No offense to any of the situation there, like, every teach their own. But like, I wouldn't want to wish that on him either. Like I said, you followed on social media and seen what my brother had gone through, and when he passed away, I didn't want his quality of life to be, it was drastically diminished. But like in this situation here, the thing that comes back to me more than anything, Kourtney, is like, you would never want to wish this situation on anybody, to have to bury their child before them. It's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be us outliving our children. But now, unfortunately, you're one of the people that have
Right.
had to go through that. And when I say that, I don't mean that as a statistic. Each one of you that have been through this is extremely important. In your own case, that's a whole experience of your own. But I think my first question for you too, really, because again, you touched on that day and what you kind of went through, but whenever you led up towards, after he had passed away, obviously, like, what was that support system like for you and your husband? Like, like, how did your parents and his parents take that news? Like, how
Ugh.
did they get involved with you? I'm sure they were trying to do. I'm sure there was people around your family that were trying to wrap their arms around you figuratively. Like, is there anything you can tell us about when it comes to your parents and any friends?
Um, well, like, I slightly remember calling everybody. I know that I was still kind of like drowsy from the surgery, and my parents were on their way up to us because they were going to pick the kids up. And obviously, with COVID-19, nobody could come visit us in the hospital. So, it was a much different situation than we had previously been in, with the first two. And especially being in that situation, you wish you could have as many people around you because of what you're going through. So, I look back on, one of my best friends, she had lost her son, and this was right before COVID had hit, and we all got to be there for her. And I don't know how it was for her, if, that, like, helped her, you know, kind of get through those first couple of days. But I know being around people kind of kept my mind off of it. And I wish that that could have been the case for us. But, calling and telling my mother, since she has personally gone through this with my sister, it was rough. I think the one thing that still gets to me is her saying, "Shut up." No, we didn't. And oh, she threw the phone down. And I don't know. When it happened, I was just so like overcome with emotion. I just lost it. And I think that's when I finally cried. I think even whenever they told me that he was gone, it didn't register right away. And so I was like in shock. And then it took my mom to, break down and for it to hit me. So I think that's what got me the most. And I can still actually picture her seeing him for the first time in his casket. And I know for her, we got to go visit him several times, or like before the funeral, because it was our funeral home. So we got to go in and hold him, like the day before before the visitation. And my mom never went with us. My sister and my dad went. And then obviously my father-in-law got to be there because, that's his place of work. So, and my mother-in-law got to go visit him. And I know everybody just, kind of had the same reaction. And we just never thought we'd ever have to go through this, because I remember thinking through the whole pregnancy that that'll never happen to me.
Yeah. Well,
So
Kourtney,
I think
go ahead. I'm
just
sorry.
looking back on it now, it's kind of like bittersweet, because, here I had to watch, one of my best friends do this. And I felt guilty because I was having a healthy pregnancy, and I wanted so bad to like take that pain away from her. And little did I know, 5 months later, I was going to be going through the same thing, and she was going to have to be there to pick me.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to comment on there, Kourtney. One, powerful, just an absolutely emotionally powerful story you told there about your mother and you. Because again, that's something that we haven't really fully touched on yet. Was Kourtney's mother has has lost a child too. So I can only, like, the part that it's really hard for me to fathom is trying to put myself in your mother's shoes in that situation and getting that phone call from you. And obviously with her going through that, I wouldn't think she would ever want to risk, like, she wouldn't want to wish someone else going through that same thing, much less her own daughter. But for that, it's like, how you just described a while ago that whenever you were first told the news of Kye and it didn't really fully register, it's like in that moment, that instinctive moment, and you told your mom, she wasn't ready to register that. She didn't want to believe that. And understandably so. I mean, I couldn't imagine. Like, is it? I mean, she lost a grandson, but I think the more focus from her was that fact that she was hurting for you and for you all, and like for Kye and everything. So I just can't imagine that. It's a tough situation to get. Like I said, I'm sitting here saying it like I'm analyzing something that I've seen or been through, but I don't know how to begin to start, really, just because when I think of the funeral services, and you mentioned on there, for your mother to see her grandson for the first time like that, for you guys to have, one of your only few moments where you've really got to spend time with him was after his passing. I mean, it's something you never forget. But another thing I wanted to comment on and really ask you a question on, something that stood out to me a lot, Kourtney, was the friend of yours that had been through this, 5 months before you, and I'm sure there's other people, at least from what I've seen comments and feedback that you've gotten this week leading up to the show, of people that I could tell they're really supportive of you. But there's other people I've seen comments, or at least that have talked to me privately, that they've been through something similar, or they know someone that's been through something similar. And I was like, man, this is really touching a lot of people. Like, they want to hear Kourtney's story. Like, now in this case with your friend, you seen what she went through. I hate that you guys both went through that, but like for you, again, not to diminish all the people that were supportive of you, but to have a friend of yours that has been through something like that, like, what does that mean whenever someone can empathize with you on that level, though? Did that bring a certain level of comfort to you in trying to cope through this situation? I mean, I know there's only so much you can do, but is that something that it made it easier for you guys to bond together because of what you had been through?
Yes, because when it happened, she instantly was like the first person I thought, if anybody knows how I feel, which I knew my mom was going to know how I felt because she had gone through it 36 years or 30, yeah, 35 years prior to, what I had to go through. But for my friend, it was still fresh in her mind. And, we had been pregnant together with, my son Hayes and her daughter. And then here we got to be pregnant together again. And we were both having boys this time. So, that was one good thing that, we were excited about. All our boys were going to be together. And just to watch her go through that, it really killed me. So I had that 5 months that I felt guilty, and I didn't want to, talk about my pregnancy, and I never wanted to make her have to think about, her son when she didn't have to. I wanted to be her support system, and then here I go through it, and the day I got home from the hospital, she was the first person here. She was, talking to me over the phone when I was in the hospital, and she actually, without her comfort, without, being able to bounce my thoughts off of her, I'm not sure what, like, mental state I would have been in now.
Well, I don't say,
And
go
if I
ahead.
haven't told her, I would say if I haven't told her, she has been like the most amazing support person and system that I could have asked for.
Oh. That's one of the parts that stands out to me the most. There, just as something positive that's come through this, is that bond that you formed, a closer bond. Is that, to me, strikes me as something that's never really going to go away. You guys will always have that bond together that brought through tragedy, brought through this type of situation that you never wish on anybody. Now, another thing that I had to ask too, because when I talked to Shaylin Pierce about this, she had children already. You're in the same situation where you have a son and a daughter already. Again, your son is quite young to understand what was going on, but did you have to try to explain to your daughter about her brother, or was that process, how did that process work for you? Like, was that a difficult situation for you to try to explain to her that your brother Kye is in a different place now? He's unfortunately not here with us.
I have tried to get her to talk about it. Now, like right now, I I take grief counseling. So I talk to somebody. It started out as every week, and then it became, now I've made good progress that now I can talk to her every other week, that it's, you know, to a point where that's all I need. So I have talked to my counselor about that before, that, my daughter doesn't really talk about it. She never has. She never really asked questions. The only thing I regret as far as her is when we got to the visitation, first thing she asked me was, "Can I hold him?" And not once did I think about taking her out to the funeral home with us to let her hold him. So that's one thing that I think I will always regret. I still want to say that I think she understands what happened, but I don't think that since I carried him for 9 months, I think, I felt him move, I felt him sick, and, to them, saw my rally and him, or see him other than him laying in that casket. So I think it's hard for her to register that, I should have two brothers instead of one.
Yeah, but so that's another thing. I think it's significant though that you mentioned that she wanted to hold him in that particular moment. That's still, because that's something that she just
Yeah.
organically developed in her own mind. The decision to ask that question, so that's still meaningful a lot to me. In that case, just to not to spend too far from it, but obviously we go a little bit past, after you have had to bury your son, and then the time since then. You mentioned being in grief counseling, and I take that as that was one of the steps that decisions you've made since his passing. But like for you, again, this is kind of an all-encompassing question, Kourtney, but how have you coped well since then? I mean, you talked about the support system, you talked about counseling. Is there anything else on top of there that's helped you kind of keep your head above water to where you're not letting this situation drag you down?
Well, after I had gotten home from the hospital, so what they think that maybe caused the placenta abruption is possibly high blood pressure, but I never had an issue with high blood pressure previous, so I'm not really sure that I still to this time, I'm not sure that that's what caused it, but, I've seen several doctors. So I've been seeing a cardiologist ever since then, and I don't know if I told you this, but they told me I'm lucky to be alive because I could have easily lost my life that day too, because I ended up getting 5 units of blood when I was in the hospital. So now I'm on blood pressure medicine. So those first couple of weeks, I don't want to say I was okay, but I want to say that maybe I was still in shock and it hadn't hit me. So I didn't, they had given me something for like anxiety, and I didn't eat it those first couple weeks. But then on 4th of July, my mom was going to go back home, and that's when like it set in. Like I was not ready to be alone. Like I could not fathom the thought of, I had just had a major surgery, and then here I was with a soon to be 2-year old and a soon to be 8-year-old, and I still couldn't chase after them. And I just had a panic attack. I had a big anxiety attack, and that's whenever I realized, like, it's not just, I am not ready to be alone. So that's when I realized, okay, I need the grief counseling. And that was the best decision I have ever made. It was by far the right thing for me to do. And it's definitely like I don't think I would be where I am now if it weren't for my counseling.
Yeah,
And
but
so between my
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say,
As I
since
say,
you mentioned
between
that.
my cardiologist, my
No, I was just gonna say
go
that the
ahead.
counseling with the counseling thing. I was just gonna throw in there real quick how much I admire that. That you kind of identified that within yourself, like, yeah, I really need this. I need to go, and you. That's not something you've regretted. So, but continue to go ahead. I just wanted to make that comment.
In between my cardiologist, my counseling, and my OBGYN, I think I have like the best doctors as far as like, my mental health, my heart issues that I've had ever since then. And, just, my OBGYN, she's been checking in on me like, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, I go see her. And, she's just making sure that all things are going in the right direction, and, that I don't end up in that position again.
No. Well, it's kind of scary too. Whenever you talked about, uh, I figured there would be some level of risk for you in that situation then too, Kourtney. But I didn't know that you were that close to. Very possible you could have passed away during the events of that too, and that would just, it's like double the devastation there. I can only imagine what that would have done to everybody. But thank God that you're okay and you got through that, at least on that physical side. But I'm glad that you are taking those steps to go through those. But another one, what I wanted to ask you too was, and again, if we're leaving any details out, feel free to go back through, because I really wanted to maximize this opportunity with you. But one of the things that I had kind of two more questions I really just wanted to ask you that I felt was important. And one of them is, like whenever you've told this story through that, and I'm not saying that you're done, but whenever people listen to this episode, what do you hope that listeners would get out of hearing your story?
I think ever since that this has happened to me, I always had that attitude, like through pregnancy is, you see other people, like this happens to other people. And I look back on it and it's like, okay, so working at the funeral home, part of my job is to go through obituaries and I type in their information and the family receives a card from the funeral home, saying, I'm sorry for your loss. And it's like for the first holiday and the first anniversary of their death. Whenever I would cross a baby's obituary, it never faced me. And it was, I am so like, I could not imagine what their parents are going through. But, I'll be honest, in my mind, that was never going to happen to me. And I felt that way. And then after now going through it, I can hardly even look at a baby's obituary. It it brings all those emotions back that I hope I never have to feel again, like for me personally. And I hope that people think I don't want people to I don't want to scare anybody, but I also want people to know that there are so many things in pregnancy that you think, we live in this world of such great technology and advancements, but anything can happen. You can't
Mm.
say, like, you can't go through life and think that that can't happen to me. And I don't know if that's not necessarily something that, people would think like, that's what I'm going to take away from the story. But I think it's kind of opened my eyes into a reality of anything can happen. And I hope people know that, they're not alone because this happens a lot. And I want people to know that there are other people to talk to. And one thing that I did realize like after this happened to me was, I was asked to, join these groups and all that kind of stuff. But that's not me. I had to figure out what was right for my story before I listened to other people's stories. So I hope that people realize, figure out yourself first and take care of yourself before you move on to other stuff.
Yeah, you did a good job. I think it's best summed up of you got to really help yourself first before you can help someone else. But you
Correct.
actually did a good job of just going ahead and answering my second question, which is going to be advice for like people that have been through that, but they're kind of in that stage where they don't really know what to do or how to handle it. And that's one of the things that, but I do have a good alternative question. Like I loved your response there, and one would be, since you mentioned counseling and that being a route. Now, knowing you like I think you do, Kourtney, I think that you would feel like everybody's going to kind of have to figure out their own route with some guidance if they need to. But like you might have went counseling on one way, that might not be everybody's answer. But like for you, is that an optional route for other people that have been through that you would recommend if they were to come up and say, Kourtney, you've told me about counseling before. Is it worth it, in your opinion, to go that route? Like, what would you tell them if you asked you about counseling?
At this point in time, I almost wish that I would have started counseling like a long time ago. Like before this was even a thing. Like just it's nice to bounce ideas off somebody that you don't know and they don't know you personally and they can give you an honest outlook or this is what you should do or you know they can kind of give you the advice that you wouldn't get from like your parents or your friends or whatever as far as that goes. But like you said, that is not for everybody. And, some people may enjoy those groups as far as hearing stories of what other people have gone through. But that was just, even now, honestly don't know that that is something that I will ever want to do. I want to be there to support those people, but I just, uh, I don't know how to say this without it sounding bad, but there is just like, there is so much sadness in the world, and thinking like outside of my own world, like I don't want this to sound selfish. It's just, it's still so fresh to me that it's hard for me to sit and listen to somebody else. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how I'm dealing with this because, we're not even 5 months out yet.
I would say it's so fresh, but it makes me think of almost like you kind of have your own personal boundaries right now where you're willing to
Right.
go, but that could be adjustable. Maybe over time, that broadens out. But I could, like I said, I'm completely just trying to fathom what that's like, which it's so painful to imagine it. But like again, the different people, everybody has a different story, and everybody handles these situations different. Everybody handles tragedy differently, even in general. But Kourtney, I think that's great advice that you given, and I think you summed it up really well. Honestly, I didn't have any more real questions on that particular end there. I think you did a good job covering his story. Now, I did want to ask you one more time because we talked about before the show, and I thought it was powerful. You mentioned it during the show, but as far as your mother and you losing a sister, was there any more a part of that particular story that you wanted to provide, or to, like, I just wanted to make sure I gave you that last platform to share anything else there, because like I said, that's a huge connection there. The fact that your mom had been through it, you had been through it, and like I said, that kind of like even strengthens. I would think strengthens the bond between your mom and you too. Not to say that you've not always been close, but that's something that you've both had to bear, unfortunately, and I hate that for you. But I just want to give you one last time. Is there anything else that you would want to say about your mother or father?
I mean, they have both been amazing through this entire thing, and without the two of them, without my dad letting my mom coming to stay with me until almost the end of July. So she was here from the day that he passed away until I think I got home because I came down to Tell City for a little bit over a week, and it was probably July 28th when I came home. So literally, I was with my mom from June 7th to July 28th, and without my dad letting my mom be here for me that whole time, I don't know where mentally that I would be. And, her and I would sit down and, we talked about like what she went through, and just it was nice to have somebody else to sit there and, talk about it with. And, I think it kind of gave us both comfort that, my big sister is up there taking care of her nephew.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of a bittersweet moment for both of us.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing though what she did and being down there to spend that time with you. I think it, like I said, it sounded to me like I think that's something that you needed at that time too. But I know you did touch on too about you did experience some difficulty after she had come back home. I don't know if that's ever she did, but I'm sure your mom did too though. I'm sure that had to be tough for her to head back home and leave you there. I'm sure if she's anything like Mama Malcomson, Kourtney, that mothers never stop worrying about their children; they never stop caring. But more than anything, Kourtney, like I said, I'm finishing into the closing thoughts here. Which again, looking back at the episode, and you're free to throw anything else in there. I just don't want to make sure we leave anything out. But I'll start off by giving you my takeaways from this experience. And more than anything, I love the whole thing. Like just to touch on the early beginning, it was cool to really get to hear more about your background and your time, us growing up whenever we were younger. And then of course, just having a little bit of fun with that triggered segment we were doing just to see a reaction. I have to say Tom Brady's name one more time, just to sneak that in there. But I think roll your eyes a lot tonight. But I do have to say too.
When I hear that name, I do.
Well, I mean, and obviously the main I want to call the main event of this particular episode was obviously Kye's story and what you went through, and your husband and your family and all your friends. And like I said, the part that sticks out to me more, I knew going in this week, I was very much anticipating this episode. I was very excited about doing this with you, and just getting to hang out with you again, Kourtney. Like, just to be able to talk like this, it's been a long time, but I've really thoroughly enjoyed that. The story about Kye, extremely emotionally powerful. I thought it was going to be. It was on a whole nother level. I know we talked about before the show. You're hoping you were gonna be able to keep it together. And honestly, like I said, the fact that you opened up, it made me feel. It made me feel so much more powerful in that moment. Like I could feel your pain, but that was something that I'm welcoming. I wanted to be able to hear. I want to hear that story. That's the part that's the most important takeaway of this episode is Kourtney. We all have stories in our lives in different chapters, and this is a very powerful chapter in Kourtney's life. I'm her friend. I care about her. I want to hear your story. And like I said, we've seen it through this whole week, Kourtney. A lot of people do. There's a lot of people that want to understand you more. They want to know what you went through. They want to be able to support you, and I think that's the most beautiful thing that's come from all this. But that's basically the way I can sum up more than anything, Kourtney. But like for you, looking back on this podcast experience, first podcast you've ever done, and you've officially done a good job, I think. Now for you, what if you had to summarize this? Like, how was this experience for you, and what do you take from this episode?
I think that it's been great to get my story out there and that people know that they're not alone because, a loss is a loss, whether it was at, 5 weeks or at 37 weeks and 2 days like it was for me. You know, I don't want to say, welcome to the club, but, it's something that we can all come together in and we can support each other and know that you're not alone.
No. That's a great response, Kourtney, because like I said, I think that's the best way you can summarize it, just making it clear that if anybody out there is going through that, even if it's something different, like if you're dealing with any type of issue at all, whether it's like mental struggles, mental illness, things of that nature, reach out to somebody. That was one of the things. Like you can reach out to me. I would love to give you the platform to tell your story, like Kourtney and Shaylin have been through. But you don't have to do that either. If you just need to talk to somebody, a close friend, that's the kind of stuff you just don't want to bottle up over time. So please reach out to somebody if you want to get help. My last request to finish out the show is I would very much appreciate it if anybody that's taken the time to listen to this, that's given me your time, if you could just give Kourtney a little bit more of your time after the show, and please message her or comment on her posts and just let her know, like, give her some feedback on this. Let her know let her know what her story did for you, how it impacted you, anything proactive that comes from that. I would just love to hear that. Now, if you're not comfortable reaching out to Kourtney directly and you just wanted to relay it through me, you're more than welcome to message me and I'll put that on there. Kourtney does have a Facebook. She also has a Twitter account, but you can actually find her, I think, easily on any of those platforms. She has Instagram. So please, that's the biggest request I can ask is show Kourtney how important it is that she shared her story, because I definitely know how important it is. But again, Kourtney, I really appreciate your time. More than anything, I'm happy to give you the platform to tell the story of Kye, because now, like I said, this is timeless. We'll both be able to go back, and everybody else will be able to go back on over time, and Kye will never be forgotten about. That's the one thing I can promise you that. So anyways, listeners, we really appreciate this episode. Stay out tuned for episode 6, which will be coming out next week. Other than that, this has been Chapters, real people, real stories.